Have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix like these in this video? If so, consider sending it my way. Just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so, and of course, thank you. A couple of years ago, my husband and I decided that we wanted to go on a bit of a road trip. So, we took some time off work to hit the road. The plan was to go from Colorado to South Dakota because we wanted to go see some of the landmarks and parks up there, and his parents had actually moved up there. So, we were going to spend a couple of days with them between stops. The problem with my husband and road trips is that he's not the type to understand when he should stop. And he is 100% the type to push himself until he damn near passes out on the road. I've chastised him about this a dozen times, but he's too stubborn to even listen to me. This is actually where the glitch comes into play. Him being like that, and the fact that we were going on our road trip. For most of our trip up to South Dakota, we had to drive north through Wyoming. It's a very direct drive up I-25 to US 85, and the trip itself isn't terribly long. However, my husband didn't want to wait until Saturday morning to make the trip, and he decided that we needed to head out Friday evening after work. And this meant that we would be getting out of the house around 6 at night and staying on the road until 1 or 2 in the morning, depending on the time that we made. I was very much against this, but he was the one driving, so I didn't have much of a say in it. I don't have my license for reasons that aren't worth getting into, so I wasn't going to be able to drive for this trip. We were driving up to Black Hills and making our way through Wyoming when it started getting darker, and I could tell that he was getting tired. I told him that we either needed to stop and get caffeine, or get a hotel room, or something. And after fighting with him a bit, he agreed that we could stop and get coffee. We stopped, got our drinks, and headed back onto the road. I was doing fine at this point. My energy drink was working for me, but I could tell that he wasn't feeling it, because I know that look on his face when he gets tired. He starts to get this really weird stonewall stare going on. About the time that I notice this, I look back toward the road, and I see what looks like a deer run into the road. I scream for him to watch out, and this is where things get weird. I yelled at him to watch out, and I swear that I lived through him hitting the deer, through the deer smacking into the car, him swerving out to the side, and the car going off the road. I have a vivid memory of the crash. The sounds, the smell of coolant and oil, the feeling of adrenaline and terror of me sitting in the car with it upside down. I very distinctly remember looking over at his seat and seeing him unconscious, or not alive, and bloody. I don't know why I have these memories, or why they feel so incredibly real, because it never happened. It was like all of this flashed out in my mind at the exact second I told him to watch out, like I lived through 2 different timelines at once. Or like I was able to experience where things split. In reality, or in this reality, he swerved and slowed down and missed the deer. But elsewhere, he hit the deer and caused a major accident. I know this may not seem as weird as most Glitch in the Matrix stories, as I didn't really live through the events, but the memories of all this happening were absolutely put into my head somehow. Like I said, I don't feel like I lived through the situation that happened, but I remember every single second of it in agonizing detail. Like, it is what happened. I don't know in the end what to think of all this, Maybe I just have a weirdly active imagination all of a sudden, and the experience is one that I made up. Or maybe it's intrusive thoughts, but it really doesn't feel like it. This all feels like memories of the other me, the me that went through the accident, and they somehow got downloaded into my brain. I'm not sure if this is exactly a glitch in the Matrix, but it's very strange, and I want to know if anyone has experienced something similar. So, this glitch happened when I was about 4 or 5 years old at a child's birthday pool party. I don't remember any of the day before my incident happened, so sorry, there's not much detail leading up to what happened. I was swimming in the shallow end because at the time I couldn't swim. I was in my own little world, but there were plenty of people around me. I decided to go to the deep end, and of course I was starting to drown. It felt like I was drowning for so long, and I couldn't tell which direction was up. I remember all the little details that a 4 or 5-year-old just would not remember. As I was drowning, I saw my nephew walk up to me. He was probably 3 years old at the time. I even remember I saw him because of his bright yellow SpongeBob swim trunks. He saw what was happening and ran to get his mom, my sister. My sister ran and pulled me out. I was crying and remembering that pain in your throat when you swallow water down the wrong way. As we were walking back to our seats, someone else was in the process of drowning. Turns out it was the birthday girl who was turning 4. I saw her grandpa jumping in to save her. I don't remember the small things that happened for the next few minutes, unfortunately. But once my sister and I got back to our seats, my mom took her out to her car. I got my security blanket and my favorite stuffed animal at the time. That stuffed animal was a cow. I would dress it up in different outfits almost daily, and I even remember the outfit it had on that day. My cow was wearing a bright red collared shirt and blue pants. After I got my things, my mom and I went back to the party, and I sat down, and that's all I remember from that. Fast forward, I'm now 17 years old, and I have had a really bad fear of water from then on, and I just recently learned how to swim. Me and my mom are very open about things now that I'm older. She used to lie to me when I was younger to spare my feelings, but if I ask questions now, she's honest. I asked her about that day. She told me it never happened. I told her all the little details I remembered, and she still denied that it happened. She told me it was only the birthday girl who almost drowned, and that her grandpa jumped in just like I remember it. I don't think it was a false memory because none of my false memories are that vivid. I eventually asked my nephew if he remembered it. He doesn't remember either. I've always just considered that a false memory after my mom told me it didn't happen, but something just doesn't add up to me. After coming across your videos, I'm thinking it's one of those situations where you're meant to die, or you did, but after the incident, things just don't add up. If I'm supposedly in a different reality, it would make sense that no one else remembers it happening, because it didn't happen in this reality. I'm also confused on the fact that the birthday girl got noticed and saved immediately, and I was drowning long enough for my nephew to walk all the way down to the deep end. I remember there being so many people around me, so how was that possible? I understand most of the attention was on the birthday girl, because it was her special day, but the deep end was mostly adults from what I remember. How could they not notice an out-of-place small child without floaties? How did no one see me get into the pool and then immediately go under? Nothing about my story adds up, and I would love to hear if anyone had similar experiences. And Thank you for listening to my story. So, until I recently discovered the Glitch in the Matrix thread on Reddit, I had just kept this to myself as a weird little creepy story between friends. It never occurred to me that this could be a part of something bigger, where other people experience the same things. Now, I don't want to jump on the bandwagon and assume that I've experienced anything out of the ordinary, and like most people in life, I've put things down and they've not been where I thought I'd left them, but this left me weirded out like nothing else. When I was younger, I was obsessed and fascinated with ghosts and the paranormal. Sure, a typical teenager hype. But since, I've suffered with anxiety disorders. I moved into my home nearly 5 years ago now. I'm English, and I live in an old Victorian terrace house. One with thin walls and loud neighbors, pipes, and creaks. Even at 21 years old, every creak and bump in the night sent my mind racing to the point where I'd convinced myself someone was in the house. And I've hidden under the quilts to come to terms with the fact that it was simply part of the house that I was in. Over the years, not only have I become accustomed to the noises of my house, but to cure my anxious mind, I've effectively convinced myself that ghosts simply don't exist. If they don't exist, how can I fear them? It makes sense to me. And now, after many terrified nights alone, I am truly 200% sure they don't. Nor will I let myself be told otherwise. I'd stopped believing because I didn't want to be scared on my own. Anyways, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, I hadn't been in my house super long, and two things disappeared. For a bit of background, I'd gone out for a few drinks with my two best friends I had known since 3 years old. Friends I would trust with my life and my child's life. Not random backs for a party, but good pals. Firstly, I went out wearing my great aunt's ring. This was the first time I donned the item outside of the house. We were sat at the table sharing some wine when I looked at my hand and noticed it wasn't there anymore. In all honesty, it was loose-fitting on the finger that I wore it on, but I can distinctly remember all night I was constantly fidgeting with it out of fear of losing it, and I can't understand how I would have gone so long without touching it and noticing it was missing. Due to my distress, my friends instantly helped me search the house, and by house I mean the 2 rooms that we'd been in since arriving home. We even checked the street that we had walked up with flashlights, but to no avail. We were sat at my dining room table, which would be the receptacle if I were to place it down. It wasn't there. I ended up putting a post on a local Facebook group to see if anyone had found it and to keep an eye out, basically admitting to myself that I had drunkenly lost it. The night continues, and I deal with the fact that I've lost a family heirloom of sorts. We drank a little more and took ourselves into the living room. We were singing, dancing, taking selfies, the typical behavior of 3 drunken 20-year-olds. It was all very average, until I lost my phone. Now, I won't lie, I'm renowned for losing and breaking phones. It was almost a serial joke that I would lose it on a night out. Except we weren't out. We were in. And I definitely had it in the house. Naturally, we turned the room upside down. And by upside down, I mean literally. We took everything off every sofa, and chair cushions, including the big ones that made the sofa up. We lifted the rug. We pulled back the sofa and the chair, we looked in the toy boxes, and under every single piece of furniture, but it never turned up. So, we did the same thing to the dining room, the only other room that we had been in since getting back to the house. Without exaggerating, we must have turned each room 10 times, if not more. Even against what we knew was true, because we all knew that I had used my phone since arriving home. But we accepted that it must have been left at the pub. Obviously, we called the phone. We called my number countless times, with each time being sent to the voicemail. We tried Facebook and Instagram Messenger. We tried Snapchat, WhatsApp. And none of it would connect. It made no sense. My phone, the last time I checked, was at over 70%, so there was no way it was dead. Regardless, we continued searching and calling it to no avail. So, we gave up. The next day, I came downstairs, hungover, obviously, and I made some toast and sat at the dining room table to eat it. When I saw my ring, just there, in the middle of the table. Very clear, uncovered, unashamed, just there as though it was a centerpiece. Naturally, I thought it was a bit odd that we had checked the pretty much clear table several times, and it wasn't there. For it now to just be there gleaming at me. I will say now, my friends left that night before I went to bed, and we did a final thorough check. There is no way that I would believe either of them would steal that from me, and there's absolutely no way they could have re-entered the property after they left. Sure, the ring reappearing was odd, but I just figured we were drunk and missed what was staring us right in the face. I took my Facebook post down, and that was the end of it. My friends were both delighted and confused when I told them. As for my phone, several days went by and there was still no sign of it. I'd yet again posted in local Facebook sites and people had been trying to call it, however it always went to voicemail, even though I had quite a bit of battery. I could have been potentially 5 or 6 days later. I was in bed, long forgotten the phone as I'm always losing it. It's 7:10 in the morning. I hear vibrations and an obnoxious alarm song. My alarm. I have a son, so 7:10 is the time my alarm is usually set for the school run. This was a weekend. I'm laid in bed thinking it's part of a dream, but it doesn't stop and I can hear the vibrations. I go downstairs towards the living room, and it gets louder. I go towards the sofa and put my hand on one of the big bottom sofa cushions, and I can feel the vibration. I pull 2 cushions apart, and there it is, my phone, with 65% battery just buzzing and singing away to itself. Pretty much on show between the main cushions, just in the crack. I can't believe it. I turn the alarm off because, gross, it's far too early to be listening to that, but also, what the hell? I check my phone, the time is right. There are 0 missed calls, 0 messages, a load of battery, and it's on loud. I know for a fact that my sofa has been fully taken apart nearly 10 times. I know that calls wouldn't connect, and I know that for the past 5 mornings at least, an alarm has not sounded. No one other than me had a key for my house, and neither friend had been back over since to be able to plant it. It was as though I'd simply left it and nothing had happened. But something had happened. It disappeared and disconnected for nearly a week. I looked back through the photos because I knew we had taken selfies and stupid drunken videos the night that it went missing. But none of them were there. I instantly rang up my friends and my mom, and all of them were in disbelief. Granted, if it hadn't have happened to me and someone was trying to explain the scenario to me, I wouldn't have believed them either. But it did happen. My friends were baffled, my mom was dumbfounded, and I was in genuine shock. Nothing made sense. It still doesn't. My phone and ring completely vanished without a trace. My phone was disconnected from everything, and photos that I know were taken do not exist. Even on my friends' phones, there are no photos from that night. Even the ones I'd zoomed in on of my ring to post to Facebook do not exist anymore. And I don't know what this was, other than a glitch. This is on the spiritual side instead of a glitch. Or maybe it is a glitch, but I think it's spiritual. I just know the more I know, the less I know. This is something to this day that I remember vividly. It happened to me when I was 13 or 14 years of age, and I'm 30 today. I've always thought that my auntie was a witch, and one night she proved me right. Quick backstory. I've always been a sensitive kid when I was young. I could feel others' energies and intentions, which was great because it kept me out of trouble most of the time. But it also made me a loner and the weird kid of the family. I'm the black sheep, so to speak. I can feel for others, but never relate to them. I've always felt like an outsider, even at home. I've had so many weird experiences that many cannot make sense of, but today I've learned to embrace it all and got used to my encounters. Now, back to the witchy aunt. One night, I decided to stay over at her place, and during the night I woke up thirsty and was heading to the scullery, a second small kitchen. It was upstairs, and I was going for a quick drink of water. Now, I was sleeping in her daughter's room, which is located in the middle of a long hallway. Exiting the room, the scullery is on the left, and facing the room is her brother's bedroom. And on the right side of the room is my aunt's master bedroom. I leave her daughter's bedroom and head left. I get to the water tank, eyes half open, but I noticed there was someone else in the scullery with me. It was my auntie facing the sink, running the water, and seeming to be washing glasses or something of that sort as she was blocking my view. I couldn't see it for certain. Side note, my aunt is rich and has 3 maids that help her around the house. I've never seen her wash anything, ever, let alone in the middle of the night washing dishes. As I stare at her confused and half asleep, I voice my confusion and ask her, "Auntie, what are you doing washing dishes at this time of night?" She turned slowly my way to look at me. No, she stared into my soul for what felt like forever. I felt my heart stop beating for a second. I froze in place. It was her, but also not her. After the staring, she turned back slowly to what she was doing without speaking a word, nor replying to me. I felt I could move my legs again, so I just brushed it off, as I've always known her to be weird. I headed out, sipping water, and rationalized why she was the way that she was. On my way back to her daughter's bedroom, I see my auntie leaving her master bedroom, which is in the opposite end of the hallway. I froze in place for a few seconds, and she looked at me confused. Then, all of a sudden, I felt my body shut down and I passed out. I woke up on the floor in her arms with her saying prayers over me and a wet cloth over my forehead. She kept asking me what happened, and I gathered my strength to speak. I said shakenly, "I saw you twice. You were in the kitchen, and then again leaving your bedroom." She smirked and said, "Oh yeah, that's just my helper." For a second, I was glad that she validated what I'd seen, but on the other hand, she creeped me out even more. It seemed like she's used to whatever that entity was. I believe she's a witch, but maybe she was more. Maybe she was able to teleport or astral project like some believe. All in all, that was the last time that I saw her, and I've kept my distance ever since. I have a story from when I was a kid, and I know most people will look at this story and think, oh, that's not a glitch, or that's nothing important that happened, or even think that I was a kid so I don't remember things correctly. To that, I will say that you are wrong. What happened to me was a small and fairly innocuous thing, sure, but it was something that became a core memory because of how strange it was to me at the time, and how strange it is to me still. When I was young, around 8 or 9, my parents ended up getting divorced, and my dad really put a lot of effort into staying a part of my life. I'm not saying that he wasn't part of my life prior to this, but when they split up, he seemed to put more effort into being there, which was fine. Anyways, most weekends when he would come pick me up, he would take me to a fishing supply store that we had nearby. We would go there because they had a small restaurant in the store, and they also had a massive aquarium full of local freshwater fish. And being young, I absolutely thought it was the coolest thing ever. So, while my father and I were eating our lunch, I would sit and watch the fish swim around while my dad talked to me about school, friends, and literally anything else that was going on in my life. Now, there was one day that I remember on the way up there, my dad had told me that he had it on good knowledge that they had gotten several new fish, including several largemouth bass, and that they were adding them to the tank that day. Bass are, to me, really cool fish, so I was excited. We got there right as they were adding them to the tank, so we went to go and get our food first. We got our lunch, and I recall on this day, I was feeling strangely antsy. Back then, I probably thought it was the excitement of the new fish and just spending the day with my dad, but there was something off about it. I remember telling my dad that I needed to go to the restroom and excusing myself from the table. And I recall walking by the tank as the employee was adding the bass to the tank, but something about it was off. It took me several moments to really place it, but I can remember this whole thing vividly right now as I write this. Nothing was moving. When I say nothing, I mean nothing. The fish were all completely motionless. The employee that was adding the fish was kneeling and holding the container of water with the bass in it, and they were pouring the water into the large tank, but the water wasn't moving. For what felt like several moments, everything in the store seemed to just completely stop moving and sit motionless, almost like time had stopped. I stared at the fish thinking that they would swim up to see what was going on. I stared at the employee thinking they were going to add the fish any second now, but none of it happened while I was staring. It was as if the entire scene in front of me was frozen in time, and I was the only one bearing witness to this weird lockup. I recall how much that weird feeling of anxiety hit me while I was staring at this situation. I remember feeling like, what is going on? And then immediately being struck with, what I am seeing should not be happening. I turned around to look at my dad, and the second I turned, I heard the sound of the water hitting the water in the tank, and life continued as normal. I looked back, and things were happening as they were supposed to. Obviously, back then, I didn't know what to think of the whole thing, but looking at it now, and having looked into glitch stories and how things are probably a simulation, this almost felt like some kind of lag. Like, my brain was a step ahead of the program that was running, and I wasn't supposed to notice it. But I did. It was definitely the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me, and I've never had another experience like it. When I was a teenager, we moved out to an army weapons testing base where my father worked. He'd been there since the late 1940s. Most of my life up to that point had been in a city 30 miles away. After years of driving it, the old man decided to move out to the base to make life easier. The year was about 1980. I had gotten my driver's license and started spending time back home, sometimes taking kids from the base with me. The story is about one of those rides. Las Cruces is west of White Sands Missile Range, and there's a mountain pass that must be traversed. On the west side of the mountain before the pass, there's a little town called Oregon. Several miles west of Oregon, we began to approach an old Lincoln Continental. It was burgundy-colored with the vinyl top. I can still see it. It was cruising about 50 miles per hour and the speed limit was 55. I liked to play with machines and had modified my own car to go pretty fast. Normally I would have flown past him like a rocket, but there was something strange about this car, so I hung back. We closed distance, and I backed off of the throttle. Andrea turned off the radio, and a short conversation later, we both agreed that something was off about the Lincoln. We went through Oregon, the speed limit dropped to 45 and then went down to 40. The pass was just ahead. Oregon Pass has an old Nike Hercules at an overlook on the east side of the pass. You can even see it today. The pass itself, back then, was 2 lanes in each direction and it curved. There, sides of the pass are high. It's like going through a tunnel without a roof. Nowhere to go but down the road. The other side, east of the pass, has the overlook with the missile. It has a slight curve and then goes straight for miles. Again, nowhere to go. The rise and fall at the peak is rapid enough that if you're not right on a vehicle in front of you, you'll lose sight of it for a brief moment. And that's what happened. We crested the hill, lost sight of the Lincoln still in the pass, and continued our journey. We crested the hill, and as we did, Andrea asked, "Did you see that?" The car was gone, without a trace. We were close enough to it that it could not have outrun us to get to the pass. We looked at the overlook, and down the road, there wasn't another car in sight. This just happened yesterday, and I remembered this Reddit group and thought it would be interesting to share, to see if anyone else can possibly explain some other way she would have known. For background, I, 19M, had a sleepover on Saturday with a group of friends. C, 21 non-binary, A, 19 non-binary, and D, 19 female. Our other friend, H, 17 female, was meant to spend the night as well, but changed her mind after a stressful week. The plan was that I would wake up Saturday morning to go to a college open house at my college campus with H, who is currently in her tour process. After the tour, we would come home and C, A, and D would arrive. We would all be dyeing our hair and playing some games like Mario Party and One Night Werewolf. We really enjoy playing games all together like this. C was planning on getting drunk, which we all thought would be fun to witness. After H had already gone home with her new hairdo, I had elected to cut my hair into more of a shag, and I was helping D bleach her hair. We were all laughing, as C had just finished attempting to shotgun a can of hard seltzer. Keyword attempt. It got all over my bathroom mirror and walls instead, and then A was playing music for us all. D suddenly called me Philip. There are 3 things to know as to why her calling me Philip was so strange. 1. My name is not and has never been Philip. Not even closely related to it either. 2. I'm FTM transgender. My legal name is nowhere close to Philip, and neither is my actual name. 3. My mom was going to name me Philip had I been born assigned male. I froze and said, "How the hell did you know that?" She said, "Know what?" I laughed and said, "No, seriously. When did my mom tell you that? And when did you come up with the idea for this joke? It's a good one, though. You spooked me there for a second." They said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I just think you give off Philip vibes, that's it." I then explained to my friends that my mom had wanted to name my older brother Philip, but his dad objected, so she saved it for her next kid. When I came out and the doctors declared me female, she scrapped Philip, and her and my dad came up with something else relating to a movie character that my mom had admired. My friends all confirmed that my mom hadn't mentioned it at any point that day or prior. Normally, I would think that they were pulling my leg, but even my mom confirmed and pointed out, why would she even bring that up with them? Given that even my severely drunk friend, C, was dead serious. This friend can't hold water without immediately losing it when drunk. We can't even make eye contact without a "don't look at me" and an eruption of giggles from them. I'm inclined to trust them. Plus, after how freaked out I looked, they would have spilled the beans by now. Dee swears that she doesn't know how she knew about it. She just had this feeling that I had Philip vibes, or should have been a Philip. Anyone have any other ideas? 'Cause I'm at a loss. And I'm becoming convinced that this was some sort of glitch in the Matrix, or a case of morphic resonance fields, or something like that. One day, I was on the way to my girlfriend's house when a glitch happened to me. I frequently visited her house from time to time, and one day she was quite upset that she'd had a fight with her best friend of 11 years, so she'd wanted to see me as soon as possible. At that time, I was working, and it was Saturday, so I had half a workday. I told her that I would only be free after 6 p.m. because I had to run a few errands, and also I exited my work way later than I anticipated. She was adamant that I come straight to her house after my work was finished, so I left work at 4 p.m. It's 1 p.m. normal exit time on Saturdays. So, as I'm getting my motorcycle going, I call her and tell her that I'm coming to her house just like she wanted. I reach her house at precisely 4:48 p.m. I remember that, because I had just gotten a notification on my phone, and when I pulled my phone out to check what it was obviously a spam message, but the time read 4:48 p.m. Then, I opened up the gate and I entered the house, and there she was with her face quite red. She says, "Where were you all of this time?" I told her to just calm down and that I was at work earlier, and she replied telling me that I told her I left work at 4 p.m. and now it was 6 p.m. She pointed at the clock in her house. I jokingly said that I thought the time on her clock was wrong, and she blew up on me, and then I pulled out my phone to show her that it was only 5 p.m. But, unfortunately for me, the clock on my phone also read 6:03 p.m. I was dumbfounded, and I had no answers for any question that she had. I had just missed out on an hour of my life without any explanation. I just wanted some answers. But up to this day, she hasn't accepted what happened. This is one experience with glitches in the Matrix that I personally encountered, and whoever you are, listening or reading this story, please, have a nice day. Hello everyone. I had an experience a week or so ago. that I just can't stop thinking about. I'm hoping someone on here can help me understand. So, here it goes. Below is just a little background about me. I'm a registered nurse and I work night shifts. I'm in my early 40s. I do 12-hour shifts, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'll preface this by saying I was not tired at all. I've been a night shift nurse most of my nursing career, and I have no issues sleeping during the day. I was not tired when this happened. I work in a nursing home on the short-term rehab unit, so there's always a lot of admissions and discharges from my unit. When we get a new patient, it's the nurse's responsibility to take the diet order to the kitchen. So, usually around 6 a.m. I'll print out and take any new diet orders to the kitchen that we have. Now, on to my experience. One night late last week, I got 3 new patients, so I had printed out their diets. I had a little more charting to do, so I was at the computer finishing up all my tasks, when all of a sudden I got this vision. I don't know what else to call it. In this vision, I saw myself walking through the halls, heading to the kitchen, holding the diet orders. All of this is normal for what I always do. But then, in this vision, when I turned the corner to walk down the hall where the kitchen is, I saw myself have a freak accident. I saw a ceiling tile fall on me in just the right way that it split my head open, and there was blood everywhere. I was just lying on the floor and I died. It was like I just watched a short excerpt of a movie, but it was of me dying. The vision only lasted a couple of seconds, but it totally freaked me out. It was like I was actually supposed to die at that exact time. My usual routine was thrown off, though, because I was a bit behind, and because I was finishing up some charting. I stopped charting, and I was so confused at that vision. I've never had anything like that happen to me. The only thing close that I've experienced is 90% of the time when I walk down a set of stairs, I can picture myself falling down them. I think I may have died in a past life falling down the stairs. I'm very sensitive and awake to a lot of things in this universe. I'm still learning more and more every day. After the initial shell shock of trying to process what I just saw, the first thought that came to mind was, maybe it wasn't a vision, but it was a memory of how I just died, and me sitting at the computer was the place I was reset into in a different timeline, one closest to where I had just died in. This whole experience has really freaked me out. Was this a memory, a vision, a glitch, CERN? I just don't know, but I felt everything that happened in the vision. I've been trying to mentally take note of any changes in my life, even down to small details that happen. Things have definitely been off for me ever since they turned on the CERN machine. If anyone can help me process all this, I would appreciate it. I only told my boyfriend about this because the experience sounds so crazy to me, and I know that I'm not crazy. To end this post, I'll reiterate that I was not tired. I was wide awake, and I was at work. I don't drink or do any kind of drugs, and I'm not on any kind of medication. I have a weird experience like these. I'll share a short one. My wife and I moved to Texas to a new apartment. A couple of months after moving in, we came home from the store and went up to our floor. There was a guy in the hallway yelling, "Let me in! Let me in!" He was sitting alone on the floor in the middle of the hallway wearing all white. All of the doors to the apartments are on the right side of the hallways. I mention this because our complex is large and it's difficult to find specific apartments if you haven't been there. So we would follow the numbers on the door until we knew where our apartment was by heart. Being in a new state, this guy made me nervous, so as soon as we got in the apartment, I looked out of the peephole to make sure he wasn't following us, but he was gone. I left the apartment and told my wife to lock the door behind me while I go see what's going on. The hallway is very long, and there's no way he could have gotten up off of the floor and into an apartment within a second or two, and he was not anywhere near an apartment door. So he couldn't have gone in somewhere within the time it took me to shut the door and look through the peephole. The strangest part of this story is, now, all the apartment doors are on the opposite side of the hallways, and they have been ever since. It's very, very strange, and I'm not sure how to explain it. So that was this week's collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. That's right, I didn't forget. Haha. I'm joking, I didn't forget, really. Anyways, that was this week's collection of Glitch stories. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. My phone keeps going off, please stop. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and hopefully these stories were good. Just good stories that you enjoyed. Weird, glitchy goodness. You know how that goes every week. Yeah. If you did, please consider hitting that thumbsity up button, the little one that points upwards. If you didn't, you can hit the thumbsity down button, but then if you didn't like the video, hit the thumbs down button, but make sure you hit it twice, okay? That's just yeah. Anyway, if you're new to the channel and like what you heard, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Become part of the Nevermore, as I used to call it and sometimes still do. Yeah. There's also the other thing you can do, which is what's known as the word of the week. I don't know why I paused there. I was just being dramatic for the purpose of being dramatic. It makes no sense. It's postmodern art at this point. On the screen now and a few seconds before now are all the people who submitted their sentences in my comments for the word of the week last week. Each and every single one of you is truly amazing. I hope you know that. And I appreciate that you all take the time to leave these comments. Now, since we're hitting close to the end of the alphabet, and we're at the letter U, and these are glitch stories, I figured the word update would be a good one to throw as a word of the week. We're going to go with two definitions: to alter so as to be up to date, or to inform someone with the latest information. Now, update may be a hard one, but I believe you are all beyond capable of doing it. You're beyond capable of using the word update in a sentence. I know you are, so good luck with that. Now, if you don't mind, Windows is bugging me, telling me it has an update. I'm sure it won't cause it to blue screen and crash immensely and cause everything on my computer to break. I'm sure that won't happen, because nobody in the entirety of the universe has ever had that problem happen with the Windows update, right? Never ever, not once, not a